So, what am I most afraid of? That was a question that I posted on YouTube, actually, on a poll a while back. And it's not sleep paralysis, it's actually witches. And it's because I grew up with this kind of story. But there was this caller from our other podcast in Spanish, the version of True Scary Story in Spanish, who's called in and told me one of the most terrifying stories of a witch. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about when I say Mexican stories are scary, like really scary. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. So today you're going to find out why I'm afraid of brujas. You ready? My name is Edwin, and this is Paranormal Club. Before we get started with today's episode, I just want to take a minute to say thanks for all the positive comments that have been coming in through our other podcast, Horror Story. I recently published an episode called How Governments Disappear Humans. And it was a tough one, a very tough one to get through because during the research, I was reading about all these atrocities done by governments and, people in power who are basically making it legal to get rid of certain groups of people that they don't want in their countries. In some cases, going as far as genocide, straight up killing them, execution style. It's a terrible thing. And some of these things are recent, as in 2017, there was a large event too. This stuff is happening, Guatemala and happening in, we see this stuff in China, and we see it in a lot of places. And it's now we're spotting the patterns in the United States. And this time is against my people, my communities. So I was very happy to see the comments that are coming in that shows me that our community is strong, that we know what's going on, we're aware of it, and we are standing up. So I just want to say thanks for that. I did get a few emails saying that they were sending a positive email. They were telling me a thanks because they were aware that I might be getting a lot of hate online because of that. And I appreciate that very, very much. So far, we've been doing a good job in moderating the comments. Like, there's something I'm okay with criticism. I'm okay with, if you want to challenge something that we researched that we got wrong or something like that, I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay is you to just say you're lying and not tell me where the lie is, because this is not just politics. This is actual history. This is stuff that's happened, and it's happening right now. If you're new to this podcast, if you're new to this show, this is not normally how we start. But then again, what's happening right now is anything but normal. So we're just going to get started with today's episode. I promised you a story about brujas, witches. And this story, just a little background, came in for the podcast called Terror Historias Reales, which is where people call me, we have a conversation, we record their story, then we edit it and submit it. And similar to True Scary Story, except these are in Spanish. And when I say that stories in from Mexico about witches and all stuff are scary, this is why. Like, this is going to tell you, this kind of like an example, like a real example of what I mean by that. So without further ado, we're going to get started with today's episode. We have Susana's story translated. So this is going to be her actual transcript of the story she like our conversation. So it's going to might sound a little quirky at times, but because it wasn't typed, it was actually like said and spoken. If you want to listen to the actual one, I'm going to list the episode so you can go check it out and listen to it in Spanish directly from Susana. Heads up, in this story, in the second part, I'll give you a warning beforehand, but there is mention, the actual descriptions of suicide. So if you're sensitive to that, please take care. Again, I'll tell you a little bit before, so you know, but because it's split into two sections. But this is still pretty creepy, so be warned about that part too. Here we go. My story began when I was about 13 years old. That was in Mexico, in a town called Cuerámaro. But it took place on my grandparents' ranch. At that time, I would stay there sometimes with my grandparents because my parents lived in the city. We all lived in the city, but we would go visit my grandparents on my father's side, and they lived on a small ranch nearby. Well, there were no bathrooms, no toilets as we knew them, nothing like that. We were poor, so we usually had behind the houses out there in the ranches what are called latrinas, something like that, she says. They're built like little booths. I remember they were like sacks or something around them to block the view so nobody could see, and they placed them far away so the stench wouldn't come near the houses. But at night, we would only go behind the houses because of the dogs or, well, other people who might pass by and could see us. But also, back then, there was a cornfield behind my grandfather's house. They had large land plots, and this milpa, the milpa is a cornfield. The milpa was planted with maize. I remember that the corn was already in the later stage, not green anymore. It was dry. They were beginning to harvest. They were knocking down the corn stalks, and many were still upright. I stayed there at my grandfather's house. At night, I remember that particular day. I'm not someone who usually goes to the bathroom at night, but that time I woke up because my cousin was awake. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning. My cousin was up, and she began calling me. Like she said, Susana, Susana. My name is Maria, but she called me Susana. This is what they call me. Sometimes we have different names. Sometimes it's like a middle name. So she woke me up and said, go with me to the bathroom. So we got up and went to the back of the house because, like I said, we didn't want to go all the way to Latrinas. They were too far. So we went behind the house, and there we were, the two of us. And then we did what we had to do, and we were just sitting there. And I remember she said, do you see that light over there? And in the distance, the cornfield, like between the stalks, there was a light. Like it was roaming from one side to the other, right to left, left to right, and then moving forward and back in front of us. But far away, maybe I think half a mile or so. And I said yes. I thought it was someone spying on us. So I stood up, headed towards where the light was. I started walking, and my cousin, what happened was she ran and went into the house. The more I approached the light, it began to hold still, static, unmoving. I thought it was someone, and I said I would tell my grandfather if someone was there. I began to shout and everything. And that light turned off. And I thought, okay, everything's fine now. But suddenly I saw a figure in the distance that came toward me. Like it was, I don't know, like a flying sack. And it came toward me, toward where I was. So I was standing in front of it and tried to turn and run, but there were corn stalks thrown across the furrows of the field. Stalks were knocked down, and so I tripped over one and fell backwards into the dirt. And there I was, lying there, awake, and I remained motionless. I mean, I didn't want to move because I got very scared. I felt terror inside, like chills. And then suddenly, above me, I just think it was a few centimeters away from me, when I saw what looked like a person's face. But I can't describe it. It looked like an old woman, but with a much more wrinkled face, very white, with white eyes like someone who was dried up. It almost passed right over me, and then went back and hovered, sniffing around. That's when I got frightened, because at that moment, my grandmother came out. She came out with my cousin. My grandma began to pray. She knelt, and that thing, even to me, it wasn't like a person. It looked like a person, but it wasn't, because it was flying. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It began to leave, but I remember that peculiar smell, like cow manure and earth, and every time I smell that, I still think about it. My grandmother was not someone who believed much in spells or anything like that, but at that moment, she knew how to help. I remember she began to pray, she knelt and made the sign of the cross toward that figure, and it left. It faded like a light and retreated from where we were standing, and that's it. And that's not the only time I've seen what they call a witch, or a person who does evil things and can even fly and all that. Another time I was with my grandmother and some cousins from the city where I lived, going to my grandmother's ranch. And that was at night. It was around 6 or 7 in the evening. and it was already getting dark. Back then, many fields had already been harvested. They were all knocked down. There was almost no vegetation at the sides because they were just fields, empty land with nothing planted. And we were walking. I remember that long road that looked pretty nice with the moonlight because the fields looked nice, flat, and without anything. And even the earth looked like it was shining a bit. So we were walking, and I remember I was chatting with my cousins. My grandmother was walking with my aunt. Everything was calm and quiet because, well, nothing was happening. And then suddenly, above us, there was a noise. Like a sound, something passing over us. And then again, behind us. And again, like that same noise, just passing right over us. And I thought maybe it was an owl or a bull, like they called. Big birds. And when they fly, they make that noise because their wings are wide. And I thought it was that. But then far off, we saw a weird red light. I didn't pay much attention. I thought maybe it was a plane or something. But again, we heard the swoop noise passing again. And that's when my grandmother said, "Walk faster. Don't look to either side. Don't look up. Just walk faster." She bent down and used one of her shoelaces. She used to wear tennis shoes. And what she did was tie the lace. And she kept telling us, keep walking. She was going to join us after we kept walking. So we waited for her a little bit while she finished. And then we walked faster. I remember that long road. There was a side path with pine trees on the left. I was walking in front, and to the left there was a path into the forest of pines. I remember it was very distinctive. And I knew there were pines because the path was lined with nothing but those trees. Among those pines, I saw, in the air, a figure seeming to jump. Because they don't use brooms or anything like that. They jump in the air. And they wear black hoods. Now, that much I know because that's all I saw. I couldn't see hands or shoes or anything, just a black hooded figure floating in the distance. I remember I stared at it, and my grandmother said, "Don't look." And she began tying knots in the lace, praying. I don't know what she was saying exactly, but she started doing all that, and we were passing exactly where that figure was. She tied a stronger knot and said, "In the name of God, amen." And then she pulled it all strongly, like grabbing something with force, quick. At that moment, that figure that had been jumping in the air fell to the ground because we saw it. Like when something heavy falls on loose soil and kicks up dust, that's what we saw and heard. A loud crack and then dust in the air. Then my grandmother said, "Let's go quickly." She buried that knotted lace in the ground right where we had passed by that thing, that person or witch, and told us, "Come on, let's go. When it unties, it's going to follow us." So we walked away fast. We were all like, "It's going to follow us?" Now, none of us knew what was happening. Well, obviously my cousins knew. On the ranch, there are many stories about witches and spirits. But I didn't know what a witch was. Not really, until that happened. And my grandmother told us that this person, or this figure, this witch, had been watching my cousin and me. She said it had been following us. But fortunately, nothing happened to my cousin or me. But to one of my male cousins. Yeah. They took him. And when he returned, he was messed up. You see, my cousin used to go to the ranch to look after animals. Goats, cows. They had many animals. In the mornings, he would go to the hills where there was more food. So I remember well that year this happened. And I remember around the time that this happened, it was in the 90s, when he went to take the animals out to graze. He would always return around 4 or 5 in the afternoon because he left very early, like early in the morning, and came back at around 5 or 6. That day in particular, we were with my parents, the whole family. It was time for Easter because I remember they were preparing the traditional feast, Cuaresma, foods like fish, shrimps, nopales, a lot of typical Mexican food. And we're all sitting together. And time went by and my cousin didn't show up. He kept not showing up and they got late. My 2 uncles and my dad and more cousins went to find him, and they thought perhaps he had gotten lost with the animals or whatnot, and they had to help, even just to herd the animals. So when they went out, they were searching for him, but couldn't find him. When they got back, they were scared. They found only his lunchbox, untouched, hanging from a little tree, and his sweater. They found pieces of his clothes scattered along the path, and the animals came back by themselves. My uncles and father were frightened and brought his belongings back to us. We were devastated. We all worried about what had happened. My uncle went immediately to contact the nearest police station. It was in the city where I lived, and the ranch was about half an hour away. My uncle had to drive his truck to get a policeman because he thought someone had possibly done something to his son. But hours passed that night, and we didn't sleep. The next day, everyone went searching the hills. We didn't find anything. Absolutely nothing. And so that week passed. Then, around midweek, my cousin returned. From behind my grandparents' houses, where there were many plots of land that they had planted. He arrived literally walking. But he was like, I don't know, distant, like not crying or scared or worried, just blank. He arrived as if, you know how when someone just leaves their mind, like they're not really there? He arrived like that. He wasn't completely naked. He still had his underwear on. But he was very dirty, like he smelled strongly of chicken poop, and he had feathers stuck in his hair, his armpits, all over his body. I remember it very clearly. We all ran to him to hug him, to see what had happened, and asked him all these things. And he said, "Why are you all acting like that? Why am I like this? What did you do to me?" We said, "You weren't here. What happened? Who took you? What happened?" And he said, "No, I was here. I was just back playing." He said he had won some marbles, and we stared at him like, what? After that, he didn't react much better. He became more, I don't know how to say it, blank. Sometimes he would stare off into the distance, his gaze lost, like he wasn't thinking about anything. People say it must have been that same witch that had been following my cousin and me who got him. But as I say, I don't know what they mean by it didn't work, or he wasn't good for what it wanted. Maybe my cousin didn't serve its purpose, so it let him go. But when they release them, they say that they no longer remain quite sound of mind. They remain a bit, I don't know, spaced out. And he took a long time to recover. I remember they started taking him to someone to help him speak well, because he spoke poorly. Days passed, and sometimes if someone told him something, he would not respond. Then days later, he would say, "Oh yes, I remember what you said." And he would think, "I told you that a long time ago." And he would say, "No, you just asked me now." Things like that. It frightened all of us greatly because, as I said, I didn't believe much in these things, witches or anything. But after that, it became very real. My grandmother said that whoever wanted him, or me, or my cousin, the witch wanted a girl, a woman, to make it into its servant. And that's why my cousin came back covered in chicken feathers. Isn't that creepy? Now these are like family accounts, like witnesses. You know, you have a grandparent telling you about this stuff. You have cousins witnessing the same thing. Yeah, man. Oh. All right. So this next part is where we mention suicide, and please take care of listening to this part. It's very dark, and the episode is also available completely. It's full. It's there on Terror Historias Reales. She continues her story, right? The most horrifying thing I ever experienced in my life, something I remember with a lot of pain, is that sadly someone died because of it. I was 17 years old. I had a friend. Well, how can I put it? He was someone who really believed in ghosts. Really believed in those things. At that time, the song by Liberación was coming out, Enamorado de un Fantasma. That's a song. And he would always listen to it and everything. He was in love with a ghost or something like that. And he always would sing it. He'd be listening to that song over and over, and I think he was deeply in love with the girl. And this girl, well, she didn't want him. He was very hurt, and in his pain, I imagine he turned to all kinds of things. I think even satanic things. Because every time he slept or something, he would wake up saying that someone was choking him. That was the first time in my life I heard of La Mano Peluda, the hairy hand. And like I said, I didn't really believe in that stuff because I didn't see it as real. I was more skeptical about that. But I saw him doing all kinds of strange things. He even said he had buried a daughter in the cemetery, which is supposed to be part of some kind of ritual, like baptizing a spiritual child. I told him, look, don't play with those things. Those things are bad. I don't know how bad it can get, but I've always heard you shouldn't play with that stuff because it's from the devil. That's what I had always heard. But unfortunately, he didn't listen. He supposedly wanted to learn how to make the girl he loved come back to him. And I was always trying to talk sense into him, like, don't be dumb. There are other girls out there and stuff like that, but he just didn't get it. One time, his sister was there, and me, we were all friends, and this other guy and a girlfriend of ours were there too. We're in his room, just chatting like always, just talking about normal stuff, and all of a sudden, it's like his eyes rolled back. His eyes turned completely white. And I was watching him. I started to think he was just messing with us, like doing it on purpose to scare us. So I started yelling at him. I said, Chewy, what's wrong with you? Don't play around. Don't play around with this. His name is Jesus, but we called him Chewy. His sister started laughing because she thought he was joking around. But I started getting really scared because he started drooling this black stuff from his mouth. Like foaming black. Like he was spitting up rotten mud. And I was watching him like, what's going on? And I was so scared because I didn't know what to do. I grabbed him by the shoulders and I remember slapping him. I didn't know what else to do. I gave him 2 slaps and his eyes came back and he looked straight at me. I'll never forget that look. He looked at me as if to say, why did you hit me? I just said, I'm sorry, you weren't responding. And he said, La mano peluda was choking me. He said, thank you for slapping me. She was choking me. Didn't you see it? And I said, no, I didn't see anything. I just saw you like that. Then we told him everything that happened and how he looked, and he asked us to help him get rid of it. And I told him, you know what? I don't want to get involved in this stuff. My parents were of a different religion. We were raised differently with other beliefs. And well, obviously that wasn't part of our belief system, supposedly. Even though I didn't really believe what was happening, like I was seeing it, but I didn't want to believe it was happening. I didn't know whether to help him or not. And I kept thinking, what if I get in trouble with my mom or something? I didn't want that. I didn't want to get too involved. But a lot of things kept happening. Sometimes he would faint and fall to the ground, and his eyes would go white again and he would just collapse. Other times, we would revive him by putting alcohol on his neck or forehead. Sometimes he would get these weird laughing fits. He would laugh uncontrollably and then cry, saying his stomach hurt. He would say, my stomach hurts, but I can't stop laughing. And other times he would cry a lot, like a lot. And we thought, well, even his mom started to think that he was losing his mind. I don't know. He started looking for help, I think, maybe medical help. They took him to doctors, gave him medication and all that, but nothing helped. He worked at a mechanic shop. Sometimes we would be there with him. One time he was having a beer with some friends and we stopped by to say hi at the shop. I remember there was a car there with the hood open. My friend and I, we said our goodbyes, me and his sister, we left. Everyone else left too except for him. He stayed to close up the shop. That shop was close to his house. Since he didn't come home, I guess his mom started to worry. She called us to ask if he was with us, and I told her no, that he hadn't shown up, and I said, he was drinking, maybe with the guys. She said, with who? And I named the people I saw him with. Then I went to bed. And the next day, his mom called again and said, you haven't heard from him? And I said, don't tell me he didn't come home. She said, no. So I said, but he was at the shop with them. I didn't know if they had all left. Then I asked the other two guys, and they said, no, he stayed behind at the shop to close up. So I called his mom again. This time his brother answered. Another one of her sons. When he answered, I felt this chill go through my body because the mom didn't answer. What happened was that when she went to the shop to check on him, she opened the door, and unfortunately he was already hanging from a tree. A noose around his neck. And the music that was playing was that same song by Liberación, Enamorado de un fantasma. And that means in love with a ghost. I remember that song so clearly. I don't like it. I've never liked hearing it. Because when his mother described the scene where she found her son, it was with so many terrible, gruesome details. I don't know how someone can find a person who was hanged themselves and be able to describe it like that, but she said he was completely covered in mud. I don't know how or where he would have gotten all that mud. How could he had ended up in that condition? She said that when she found him, his tongue was hanging out, his eyes were bulging. But more than that, he was covered head to toe in mud, except for one spot on his chest. And on that spot, there was a little hole. I didn't see it. That's the exact description his mother gave. And to this day, I still wonder what happened. Whether it had something to do with the things he was doing, something he was playing with, something he never should have done. A lot of times I'm grateful for the advice of others or for my mom, who always said, never get involved in that stuff because that stuff is from the devil. She always said, that's from the devil, nothing else. And sadly, what happened to him taught me even more not to mess with those things because it's very bad. You get what I mean? It's very bad to try and do something. Maybe you're playing with something, watching movies, and I swear every time I watch horror movies like that, I remember him. Because I think that stuff is real. You start playing around with evil things, and of course, something bad is going to happen. So yeah, that might have been the scariest thing I've ever been through. It makes me think a lot about evil, about the devil, about how we shouldn't tempt him with all that stuff, because he exists. And he has powers, a lot of power here on earth. You start playing with those powers, like saying, I'll do this if you help me do that, or something like that, then he's going to take your word for it. Even if he doesn't help you because, well, my friend never got what he wanted. I don't know what his full story was, what he promised or what he did wrong that made that happen to him. But I'll tell you one thing. That song by Liberación got erased. I don't want to hear it again. Because every time I heard it back then, it was very popular. Cars, trucks would pass by playing it. And every time I heard it, I remembered what had happened. And it scared me. That was the first time in my life I realized that something like that could kill a person. That fear, that pain, that anguish, the thought of how everything happened. I googled stuff about the demonic, and it said that sometimes mud appears. That supposedly it's a sign, something to remind you that you're playing with filth. In fact, that's how it makes you remember the things that happened, while you're going through something like that, because obviously, you're dirtying your hands with something evil. You're trying to force someone to do something they don't want to do. Because obviously, you can't play with someone's heart or feelings. You get me? It was strange the way they found him. I don't know if that's what all suicides are like, because for everyone else, for the police, for the forensics teams, for all the reports, they classified it as suicide. But for us, those who were his friends, those who saw how he acted, for his mom, it was something else. Something more than suicide. It was pain that he was carrying from all the evil things he had been doing. They used to say sometimes he would be walking barefoot in the street. He got really lost. He drank a lot, yeah. People thought he was drunk or something. But I knew him well. He didn't use any hard drugs. He was actually pretty clean in that sense. Yeah, he would drink a beer, but not to the point of acting like that. His mom even said there were times he went to the bathroom, though, and while still in bed, not to pee, but poop. And that made him say, what's going on? At the time he sliced his own finger, it was on purpose, and it didn't hurt him. He had his finger sliced open. Imagine that. He was bleeding and everything. And he would touch his own finger and say, "Look, it doesn't hurt." He told his mom, "It doesn't hurt. What's wrong with me?" It's things like that that make you think about the way she found him, the way she described it, and how he was. For us, it was something evil, something from the devil, like they say. I never wanted to tell this story before. Not even my kids know about this story or anything. Because just hearing that song, and every time I hear it, I get chills all over again. It's something you can't believe, but it's there. And that's what I lived. You live through something that makes you think, this can't be from this world. That it can't be happening. That it only happens in movies and scary stories or in horror tales. So why am I living it? You start thinking all kinds of things. Then you hear that music again and it brings everything back to your mind and to your very soul. Do you see what I mean by these stories? May Jesus, Chuy, rest in peace. It's this kind of thing where you don't get this kind of thing in English, man. Like in stories like that are in English. This is why, different cultures have different ways of sharing stories. Like when you hear Korean stories, they're very, whatever I would call them, like they're very dark. They also use a lot of like very ghostly elements in terms of like creepy imagery, like to describe, for example, the wet ghost, a ghost with wet hair and wet clothes, because of history, like with the war, drownings, nearby areas. Like these are those kinds of stories. Different cultures have different ways, right? But for Mexican stories, I feel like there's no limit, right? And I feel like other cultures too, like from India, China, like they're equally dark, or more so, in certain ways. But I bet you weren't expecting something like that. Like this is something that people would gather around, like in the front of the house, in the porche, and the by the street, and late at night, there's nothing else to do. You talk about all these things and things that happen. And that's how I heard these stories, like these kinds of stories, from my family, my cousins, and everybody. Literally by sitting outside of a car, maybe in the sand by the beach, and they're terrifying. They're terrifying and sad, tragic. But Susana, thank you so much for sharing that story, with all of us. And if you ever want to record it in English, please let me know. Let me know. But you can hear the full story. There's 2 episodes for that story. I'll link to them in the description of this episode. It is comment time. We actually have some ideas for our name that we can call ourselves. Los Spookies apparently is the top contender, but we're gonna vote on it. So I'm gonna write down the options. If you don't see the poll right yet, like right now, it's because we're still putting it together. I think there's like 2 or 3 options right now, but hopefully we can come up with something. It'd be super cool to decide now. It's like, oh yeah, our founding community came up with this name, so now we are Los Spookies, or we are whatever we want to call ourselves. Like, I really like the word crew with it, but crew by itself doesn't make it so. The spooky crew, actually, does it sound too weird? Is that too hard to say? No, spooky sounds really cool though. We'll make a poll. We'll make a poll. Here we go. When we talk this with my last episode. Wow, there's a lot of comments that we got on here. We're gonna go through a few. Hopefully we can get through most of these. We might go record speed. Oh, it's just me replying that made it a long list. Nyla says that is freaky and the story is also creepy. Happy birthday. Love your stories and listen to all your podcasts. Yeah, it was my birthday last week. Thanks so much for all the wishes on here. It's awesome. It was awesome to see. So thank you for that. Linz Yell says, or Lindsay Yell says, the nose whistle so hard to listen to, and that's this. Sorry about that. I was really close to the mic too, and I upped the gain a little bit because it was It's just a hard balance to do. Sorry about that, but I'll fix it. That's the nose whistle. I think it's the AC that does it too. Anywho, Kaylee, happy birthday, Edwin. Thank you for doing what you do. I hope you're blessed con muchos más años. Thank you, Kaylee. Hopefully I'll live till I'm like, I don't know, 100 and something, maybe more. I don't know, but thanks for that. Elena Garcia says, happy birthday, Edwin. Love the episodes. I started listening to this podcast, all thanks to Scary Story Podcast. Your stories and episodes always send chills. Keep it scary. Keep it scary. Thanks so much for that, Ileana. There's a lot of stories on there. I was looking through the catalog, so we're translating them. A lot of episodes on there. I don't even know how many stories, because some episodes have multiple stories. Wow. Annie says, I really like Los Spookies. Susto podcast already has ghoul friends, so I think this would be great instead. Trying to listen to the Spanish episodes to help the No Sabo kid. I am so proud of you. Love all the podcasts. Salam from your favorite Latina Muslim from Central Texas. Thank you so much, Anne. I really like Los Spookies. Like, it's starting to. Okay, I'm starting to get used to it. We'll see. I should have started this episode with like, "What's up, Spookies?" How would we even start that? What's the Spookies? Big Tech says, happy birthday, Edwin. Hope your day was awesome. Thank you so much for making awesome podcasts. Definitely need merch with Keep It Scary on it. What do you think? What do you guys think of that? Thanks, Big Tech. Yeah, well, Keep It Scary. That'd be super cool to have it. I was thinking about doing something like that. Like after I read the comment, I was like, we needed like a shirt or something. But that makes, I like that. Roxney says, thank you for sharing your personal story. Unfortunately, I don't understand Spanish, so now I hope the wolf story will appear in English too. Also, your previous stories are not cringy or lame. They are everything but. I hope you will keep it scary with Scary Story Podcast. That is my absolute favorite. And it's going down. It's way scarier than any ghost. Yeah. Thanks, Roxney. There's, as I mentioned, like I've listened to the early stories. They were very, like I said, they were cringy because it was like, I don't know what I was doing too. Like I was just trying to like show the world stories. Like I was just trying to tell stories, and I was way more awkward than I am now. But it worked out. So thanks a lot for that, though. I appreciate that. Mama Bear says, "Happy birthday, Edwin. Hope it was a fantastic day." Thank you. It was really cool. It's really, really nice. I'm a huge fan of hot pot. Like, who knew? Like, can you believe it took me 36, 35? I was, well, in between there, I guess. Because at the time zone where I am, I'm like a day ahead. And it took me that long to discover hot pot. Actually, no, I discovered it earlier with Heidi Lau. But then this other place, man, so good. It took me that long. Can't believe it. Roshan says, happy birthday to the best podcaster on Spotify. Woo! Thank you. Thanks so much for that. I appreciate that, Roshan. Thank you. Adriana says, totally fangirling right now. My comment was read. Whoa, thanks, Adriana. And I'm reading this one too. Thanks so much for that. It says, I heard Amy's story on True Scary Story and it had me spooked then, but now knowing her whole story, it's even scarier. Another great episode. I'll be sending you some of my experiences soon. I love those spookies, by the way. Bring out the polls. Let's vote on it. All right, let's do it. Thanks for that, by the way. Nina Simone says, happy birthday. Thank you. Okay, happy late birthday. I hope you had a great day. First of all, F ice. Second of all, I like Los Spookies. I think that's the winner. Lastly, I don't think any of my family have messed with the paranormal, but I do believe that some people naturally attract it. That might be something we need to look into, because I kind of believe that too. Some people just give you that vibe, I feel. Anyway, it says, as well as some people have natural powers. Anytime I say or do anything slightly mean something negative, hold on. Anytime I say or do anything slightly mean, something negative happens to me right after. Call him a natural witch, or maybe it's just karma, but it never fails. Karma always catches up. I'm telling you. Thanks a lot, Kay. Aguilaram 1986 says, first off, happy birthday, Edwin. I enjoy listening to your podcast while I clean and cook. And also about Amy's story, it sounded to me like the cat was her familiar. It's sort of a witch's protector. So when she said the cat lady protects her daughter, it instantly reminded me of a witch's familiar. You know what? I hadn't looked at it from that angle. I feel like I need to learn a lot more about like witches and the, I guess, the symbolism involved, because if you didn't listen to the previous episode, it's the one where I talk about Amy's experiences, like when she first reached out to us and the things that happened. Um, I didn't think of that about the cat, because the cat was a reoccurring thing. I don't even know if that made it to the final episode actually, because I just overlooked it. Wow. But anyway, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the comment, Aguilera. I'm 1986. Stephanie says, I love your new show. I love your podcast. And I was so happy when I shared my story with you for True Scary Story Podcast. And Stephanie, you're here on Paranormal Club. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing your story. You know, I was looking through it earlier this morning, coincidentally. We were going through some of our like our tasks and how we have them, like how, when we get the stories and we're sorting through them and like archiving them and doing all the stuff. And I saw your name on there. I'm like, something weird happened there, that I had your story out again. I'm gonna figure out what happened, because it's a coincidence. I was happy to see this. I remember your story. Anyway, I have another story and would love to share it with your Spanish podcast. Feliz cumpleaños, keep it scary. Yes, please do. Share it, share it. Well, you know, we need that. That's all the comments, by the way. But we need stories for our terror historias reales. Like, we need them. We keep starting and stopping and starting and stopping. It's like up to that point where like people are understandably kind of like pissed because we get the stories, we get them, we have them. We're like, hey, we need a few more so we can get this going. And then we run out of stories, but not because it's not the people's fault. People have stories to share. It's like my fault here. And like, I need to really start digging like for people to share stories, and not just because they like I need them, right? Like we need people to want to share the stories, because those make the best ones. Um, where they can just say, I really want to tell this, and they tell it. But it helps when we have people who already shared the stories to encourage those to tell their own stories, right? That's kind of how we get started. But I'm gonna try a lot harder. We're gonna get started. We're gonna keep it going. We have them on the docket here. We have them ready. It's just a matter of scheduling them and getting more calls, more recordings. Remember, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, ideas, please email me. I'm edwin@scarystory.com. You can also find me on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram as Edwin Cove. That's EDWINCOV. Thanks a lot for your DMs on there, by the way. It might take me a bit to like get to them, but I do get to everybody eventually. Like I do, and I appreciate that we have that little issue now that was just like, I need to get back to people, but it's still manageable. It's still doable, and I appreciate all those messages and emails and stuff that come through, as well as your comments and reviews. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's all, right? Yeah, that's it. Anyway, I'll be polling everybody on what we should call ourselves on here, so watch out for that poll question. But yeah, that's all. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Keep it scary, everyone. See you soon.